Hardly any other river in Germany has been sung about as much as the Father Rhine. Myths have grown up around it. The river is by far the most important waterway in Europe because of its navigability, but also because of the 300 million tons of freight that are transported on it every year. 80% of the goods transported on waterways today pass through the Rhine. This makes it an important transport axis, providing access to the major urban and industrial centers on the Rhine and linking them with each other. Thanks to a perfected radar system, the Rhine is navigable around the clock, 365 days a year, even in foggy weather. Just Ferries set out to take a closer look at a little-noticed chapter of Rhine navigation, namely car ferries on the section of the river between the German cities of Bonn and Mainz. In this section is the Middle Rhine Valley located. This is a region like a poet's dream, and the most luxuriant imagination can conceive nothing more beautiful, is how Heinrich von Kleist described the valley. The river between Bonn and Mainz is still one of the most attractive destinations for tourists today, and as an outstanding cultural landscape, it has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2002. One reason for this is ruins. Nowhere else can you find such an abundance of medieval castles and palaces in such a small area. The Middle Rhine Valley can boast more than 30 former noble residences. Restored castles and dilapidated fortresses tower above the small towns and seem to have grown together with the landscape. It was the Romantics who discovered the Rhine and became the inventors of Rhine Romanticism. Magically attracted by the evidence of a glorious past, first painters, poets, and then their readers made pilgrimages to the impassable valley. Since the middle of the 19th century, steamships and the railroad also brought travelers to the most sung-about German slate rock, the Loreley. The Loreley is about 132 meters high. The view from the vantage point of the towns of St. Goarshausen with Katz Castle and the sister town of St. Goar with Rheinfeldt's Castle is deeply impressive for all tourists. At the Loreley, the Rhine is up to 25 meters deep and only 113 meters wide. Because this place is so narrow and deep, it is still one of the most dangerous in the upper Middle Rhine Valley. It would simply be wrong to regard the numerous ferries on the Rhine as mere means of transport. They are a real institution and belong to the Rhine Valley like the castles and the wine. Their tradition is long, and the profession of ferryman has existed on the Rhine since the Middle Ages. We start in northern Bonn, where the Mondorf ferry crosses the Rhine many times a day. As usual with all Rhine ferries, the journey takes only a few minutes, and the waiting time on both sides of the Rhine bank is usually kept within limits. For many centuries, there has been a ferry connection between Mondorf and Graurheindorf in Bonn. It is mentioned in many contemporary maps as well as in documents. And not without reason. About 1270 years ago, a Mondorf fisherman saved the son of a sovereign from drowning in the Rhine River. The father was so happy and grateful about this that he gave the rescuer a hereditary ferry right. The Mondorf is 37.35 meters long and 9.50 meters wide. The total carrying capacity is 77.50 tons. The Rhine ferry between Bad Godesberg and Niederdollendorf is a ferry at river kilometer 647 between Plittersdorf, a district of the Bonn borough of Bad Godesberg, and Niederdollendorf, a district of the city of Königswinter. The ferry KONRAD ADENAUER is in operation on this day. Another ferry is called Christophorus. A permanent ferry connection between Godesberg and Niederdollendorf has already existed at the beginning of the 18th century. The ferry company, which still exists today, was founded on March 21, 1908. The ferry KONRAD ADENAUER was built in 1967. It is 40 meters long and 11.90 meters wide. It can carry 18 cars and 250 passengers. She is equipped with 3 Mercedes engines. The next ferry is a car ferry at river kilometer 645 between Königswinter and Melhem, a district of the Bonn borough of Bad Godesberg. The ferry connection dates back at least to the 15th century. Today, the car ferry Königswinter IV is used here. The ferry operates an average of 8 times an hour and continuing daily until 9:50 p.m., starting at 5:45 a.m. on weekdays and 7:45 a.m. on Sundays and holidays. In the case of extreme high and low water, the ferry traffic has to be stopped. The ferry Königswinter IV has been in service since February 1997. With a length of 46 meters and a width of 20 meters, it is significantly larger than all previous ferries. The ferry is operated by 4 engines and has a capacity of about 40 cars as well as 500 passengers. It is designed as a side port vessel where the transported vehicles and passengers are taken on board via 2 side-mounted gates and ramps. Further south at river kilometer 640, a ferry shuttles across the Rhine between Bad Oestrich-Winkel and Remagen-Rollensegg. Named after the Siebengebirge low mountain range towering above the Rhine Valley, the car ferry thus also connects the 2 German states of Rhineland-Palatinate and North Rhine-Westphalia. The motor ferry goes back to a yaw rope ferry operated at the same location since the end of the 19th century. In the historical maps of the Prussian New Survey of 1891 through 1912, the ferry is already marked. In 2015, the ferry Siebengebirge replaced its predecessor of the same name from 1969, which later sank during a transfer trip to the North Sea. It is 50 meters long and 14 meters wide. It can transport 21 cars and 250 people. We continue south. The next Rhine ferry connects Linz and Kripp. It is primarily used by professionals, tradesmen, school children, and tourists. The oldest documentary evidence of the Rhine crossing dates from 12th December 1409. Nowadays, there is one ferry crossing the Rhine, and on busy days, it is supported by another ferry. The ferry Linz-REMAGEN was put into service in 2014. It has a length of 60.82 meters a width of 17.24 meters, and offers space for 38 vehicles and 600 passengers. Also, the replacement ferry St. Johannes is available. It is 56 meters long and almost 17 meters wide. It can carry 30 cars and 600 passengers. At Rhine kilometer 624, the car ferry Sancta Maria awaits us, running between Bad Breisig and Bad Honingen. Like many other ferries on the Rhine, this one is operated by a family business. From 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., there is on-demand service, at least every 15 minutes from each side. Built in 1995, the ship is 46 meters long and 15 meters wide. We take the opportunity and cross from one shore to another. The trip does not take long, but is a welcome change from the road. With a total length of 1,233 kilometers, the Rhine flows through 6 European countries, 865 of them through Germany alone. The Rhine thus even surpasses the Danube, which is twice as long in its entirety, but only flows through 647 kilometers of German territory. Between Rheinfelden near Basel and the North Sea, it is navigable for 884 kilometers and is one of the busiest waterways in the world. It is therefore not surprising that the mighty river has been used for transport and trade purposes for more than 2,000 years and has helped many of its riverside towns to achieve power and prosperity. This role as a historic waterway was ultimately decisive for the designation of the Upper Middle Rhine Valley as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2002. On the left side of the Rhine, the route continues past Koblenz to Boppard. Here, one of the oldest ferries known to us crosses the Rhine. The ferry boat STADT Boppard connects Boppard with the right bank of the Rhine at Filsen at Rhine kilometer 570. In 1954 and 55, a conversion with a motorization took place. A complete drive unit consisting of an air-cooled 8-cylinder diesel engine, clutch, cardan shaft, and a rudder propeller was installed at the bow, and a technically identical drive unit was installed in the engine room below the wheelhouse. Control is mechanical via shafts and roller chains. The length-width ratio is unusual. The ship is 25 meters long and 10 meters wide. The next destination of our little trip along the Rhine is St. Goar, from which at river kilometer 556, a ferry goes to St. Goarshausen. This all within sight of the world-famous Loreley, which is why the ferry is also called Loreley VI. This ship is in service since April 2003. It is capable of carrying up to 30 cars per trip between St. Goar and St. Goarshausen. The ship is 50.5 meters long and 14.8 meters wide. The ferry landing stages are both directly connected to a federal highway. On the left bank of the Rhine, the B9 runs parallel to the Rhine, and on the right bank of the Rhine, the B42 runs parallel to the Rhine. Parallel to the B9 runs the A61 freeway, which is only a few kilometers away. The ferry operates daily, although the hours of operation vary on special occasions. On weekdays, the ferry operates according to a fixed schedule. The time between two crossings varies from 15 minutes during peak hours to 30 minutes in the evening, depending on the time. We continue south. At river kilometer 546, the ferry Kaub is located, within sight of the castle Pfalzgrafenstein, whose construction began in 1326. Here sails the ferry Pfalzgrafenstein. The ship was built in 1966 and put into service in Kaub in 1969. It has a length of 48 meters and a width of 9 meters. The next ferry awaits us at river kilometer 539. With 1.2 kilometers, it is the longest ferry route in the area of the Middle Rhine. The ferry NIEDERHEIMBACH-LORCH has been underway since 1993. It is 45 meters long and 9.6 meters wide. It can carry 25 cars and 250 passengers. This ferry line opened 110 years ago in April 1910. The Mittelrhein is available as a replacement ferry. Next, we come across one of the larger ferry companies in this area at river kilometer 527. The Bingen Rüdesheim Company has several ferries and passenger ships. The car ferry connection is served by two ferries at the same time in shuttle service in such a way that they are opposite each other on the ferry ramps on both sides of the Rhine and meet each other on the journey in the middle of the stream. The operating time starts at 5:30 in the morning and ends at 2400 in the summer half year, otherwise at 2200. The ferries RHEINTAL and MARY ROOS are 60 meters long and 16.20 meters and 17.40 meters wide, respectively. In Bingen and Rüdesheim, ferrymen and Rhine boatmen look back on a centuries-old tradition. Since 1861, they had received strong competition with the establishment of a train ferry between Rüdesheim and Bingen, which resulted in many legal disputes between the ferrymen and the railroad company, which ceased its ferry activities in 1932. We are coming to the end of our ferry discovery trip along the Rhine. Of course, there are many more ferries both downstream from Bonn and upstream from Mainz. The ferry between Ingelheim and Oestrich-Winkel is the last car ferry before reaching the city of Mainz. The Ferry MICHAEL crosses the river here. The ship was built in 1969 in the Netherlands, can carry 250 passengers and 32 cars. One crossing takes about 7 to 8 minutes. Again, this is a family-run business that has operated the ferry here for over 50 years. Whatever your reason for visiting the Rhine, a short trip on one of the numerous ferries is well worth it. The tradition of Rhine ferries is long. The shallows and rocky outcrops were once treacherous, and only a good connoisseur of the river could bring his guests dry and safe from shore to shore. Even today, skill and experience are needed because the ferries cross one of the largest traffic routes in Europe. Ferry services are not nostalgic on the Rhine, but are part of the daily scene between Bonn and Mainz in the Middle Rhine Valley.